10 minutes to chat about your business, whatever you want to put up here, and how you want to do it. New members and education slot, so we work with that, and the summary and next steps. So sorry I'm flying through this, but our education slot this morning is with Patrick. So I don't know what the easiest way around is.
I saw this was out at work. Morning everybody.
Morning, Patrick.
I'm not usually one to use PowerPoint when I'm doing talking, so this is a wee bit of a new one for me. So I thought Richard did a great education slot a number of weeks ago. It was actually in this room. We took a wee bit of time to set to get a better understanding. I can't even remember how it is off the top of my head.
Customer care.
Customer service. So it was focused on customer service. So as being a business owner, he took the time to look into customer service, not so much on his own experience, but just looking into a wee bit more generally what the lay of the land was. And I sort of took the idea and I said, well, what would be beneficial for FBA and the people, visitors in the room, was to look at networking and what it really sort of entails. And what a term that keeps coming up for me was this idea of the 6 degrees of separation. So I decided to look in a wee bit more into it. So the idea of the 6 degrees of separation is the idea that people are 6 or fewer social connections away from each other. And it's often known as the 6 handshakes rule. As a result, a chain of a friend statements can be made to connect any two people in a maximum of 6 steps. So if you look, anybody that's on Facebook, you'd see the things like the mutual friends connection. So through a mutual friend of a mutual friend of a mutual friend, more than likely you can do it in 6 connections. And then I thought, there's a lot of time has passed since that kind of first came about. It was first spoke about in around 1929 by a guy, which I'll talk a wee bit more about in a minute. But it was more of a 5 connection rule the way he spoke about it. And I was thinking, well, it's 2020 now. The world's very, very different. How much is the connection and how much sort of data have to be backed up? And how is it good for networking? So the idea originated by a guy called Frigyes Karanthy. He was a Hungarian author, poet and playwright. He wrote a short essay called Change. It's only about 5 pages long. I can send it on, anybody wants the resources from this, I can send it to them. And the idea is the 6 degrees of separation. So at that time, it was 1929. And the short story, he says that the population was 1.5 billion. When I looked into it, it looked to be more than 2 billion. And the essay, he describes it putting a bet on with people in a room and describing that using no more than 5 connections, one of whom must be a personal acquaintance, that the connection must be made with nothing except the network of personal acquaintances between the 2 people. So again, it's much like the Facebook's mutual friends. So 2 key examples came out of the essay. One was a famous person, and one not so famous a person. One girl was called Selma. Now they were in Hungary. So one girl was called Selma, whatever, anybody want to make an attempt at that?
Lagerlof?
Huh?
Lagerlof?
Lagerlof, right. She won a Nobel Prize for Literature, and they were looking to make a connection to her. They knew she was bound to know the king because he was the one that actually gave her the prize. And because he gave her the prize, he actually played tennis, and then he played this guy called Mr. Kerlin, who was quite a good tennis player. He was on Wimbledon and things like that around that time period. And as it happens, one of the people in the room knew him quite well. And so they only needed 2 connections in that way. If they had to send her a letter or telegram, whatever it was, they had 2 connections that they could reach that person. And another one then, with them being in Eastern Europe, they were looking for somebody in Henry Ford's production line. And so what way they worked that was, the worker knows his foreman, he knows Mr. Ford, who in turn is a good tennis player of a publishing empire, was a very close friend of another gentleman, Has Tour, who recently struck up an acquaintance with the director of that publishing company. And it would only take a mention from one person in that room to his friend to be able to make that connection with the foreman. Mr. Ford, then the foreman, and then the riveter and the production line. So in that case, there was 4 steps. Does this make sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
Somebody says to me this morning, this lady here, have you ever heard the saying it's a small world? So going from 1929, we're jumping on the 1964 kind of time. And the phrase came from Walt Disney. He was on the New York Fair. Pepsi hired him for the New York Fair to do with bringing the world together. It was just after the Cuban Missile Crisis, so there was a lot of tension with nuclear warfare at that time. So the idea was bring people together, and Pepsi hired Walt Disney to put together an animatronics exhibition at the New York Fair. And it's actually still in Disneyland. So what they came up with, they made these dolls and animals, all clockwork, and a ferry or a boat would actually take them through the whole exhibition. It was a massive exhibition. And the idea then was they brought up a song, the Sherman Brothers then wrote a song called It's a Small World. And the song was so simple and plain that it could be easily translated. Huh?
It's now in my head for the rest of the week.
And so from that then, people would connect with each other and things like that. Oh, it's a small world. So I thought that was an interesting thing. Anyway. So then, coming into the more digital world. So this is, in 1989, there was a guy called Tim Berners-Lee. Anybody know who he was? He sat in the news one day to say, suppose all the information stored on computers everywhere were linked. Suppose I could program my computer to create a space in which everything could be linked to everything. And then later that same year, he made the first HTTP call from a client to a server, which would then become the World Wide Web. So even the computers and things like that are very well connected. The internet itself, with the computers and devices talking to each other, like things like what Alexa can do. You can tell Alexa that your fridge is empty, or your fridge will speak to Alexa to tell you that your fridge is empty. Do you want to order anything in? People connecting firstly through the likes of email, messenger, chats, blogs and forums, and through more social networks now, enabling voice, video calls and the internet, through the internet. And it's virtually free. The accountant in the room would say, well, you still need the device, the plan and things like that, but very, very little expense. So is the 6 degrees of separation actually a thing? There was an article published by The Guardian where researchers at Microsoft actually looked into it, and they looked at 180 billion different pairs of users on their database. And out of that, they found that the average length was what they called 6.6 hops, so 6.6 connections between any 2 people on that pair of users. And that 78% of the pairs could be connected in 7 steps or fewer, but some were separated by as many as 29. So on a good case scenario, you would get 6.6. On the absolute worst, you would take you to get to 29 people to get to who you would like to speak to. So what's it got to do with networking, and what is the networking element? So networking, Wikipedia is great, people slate it by bad, but the definition is really good. Networking is a socio-economic business activity which business people and entrepreneurs meet to form business relationships and to recognise, create or act upon business opportunities, share information and seek potential partners or ventures. And when I read that, what that's really saying is, in a very conscious way, with a bit of awareness, people are trying to deliberately make a connection rather than it happen haphazardly. And that's basically what I just said. But going on then from that, if you do it in a more deliberate way, does it really have to be 6 steps to actually get in touch with the people that you actually, if you know who your customer is, or you know what your service is going to help you, if you know what your product's good for, do you really need as many connections to reach them? So the world isn't getting smaller, it's just getting better connected. The world, the planet's always been the same size, unless a meteor hits it and adds another couple of tons to it, but it's just getting far better connected. I did that, put that slideshow together last sort of Thursday. I started putting it together on Friday, and I sent it to here. And in that period, just for the crack, I decided to see how easy it was to connect with some people. So I tried looking. Your man Richard Branson's quite good he's a well-known kind of networker. So I tried reaching out to him through all the kind of channels that he has. But he's it all down in lockdown, which kind of would show that some people don't necessarily want to be so kind of connected or easily available. There's another guy who's fairly easy to get a hang of, Gary Vaynerchuk. I messaged someone, I sent him a message on Twitter on the Thursday, and within 3 hours, he sent me his contact on an app called Telegram. Anybody familiar with Telegram? So it's kind of like a WhatsApp. And I spent about an hour and a half texting back and forth. And there's some things in his business that he's got a chief, he doesn't have a HR manager, he's got a chief heart manager. So it's the chief of staff, there's relations with their staff, there's just more heart-centered approach, and their job description is very different than maybe, it's sort of HR, but it's more, how do we help this person, how do we look after them even when they left the company and things like that. And so it's a very interesting conversation with him, and possible going forward, it'll be very interesting to see how it pans out. Where's Jared? You put up 3 photos of me last week, during the week.
Yeah.
There was one of the girls that commented under it, Haley.
Yeah.
I have known Haley, she was the only girl that I've been in school with since play school right up to the end I left school. That's been in every class for all of it. And I haven't been chatting that girl in about 12 years. It was through your photo, your connection, that I was able to reach out straight away. This isn't in the past week, but my mobile phone was on a Black Friday sale last year, the year before, and there was a wee bit of a crisis about it. They couldn't fulfill on their orders, and it wasn't actually the company. The fulfillment company wasn't the actual ones. They were the ones that caused the hassle, but the contact was through Vodafone. So there's a website called CEO Email. Anybody know it? It's literally a database of all the CEOs everywhere. That's on some kind of record. So the idea, it's a good way of, if you're looking to slice your network down or to cut as many people on the way, it's a very good website. I reached out, I got the email through that, emailed the boy on Vodafone, and one of his secretaries rang me later that day, rang me up, gave me an offer. They not only matched the offer, they gave me a far better offer, a far better deal, providing the phone and everything, and it was out to me within 24 hours. And I had a follow-up call about 2 weeks later. Is everything okay, Mr. Durey? Is there anything more that we can do? And it was just cutting through all the shite, everyone on Twitter, and just going direct. What I've come to learn, especially through doing FBN and learning networking to me, it was an unconscious thing, as in I wasn't even aware of it. I didn't even know that people were connected as such, and by so little degrees. But if you do it consciously and with an awareness, saying, look, this is who I need to speak to, this is who I want to talk to, these are my kind of type of people. How do I serve them? How do I reach them out? And if it's a broader audience that you're looking at, you're definitely looking towards your marketing side of things. Genius in the room right in that corner, Mr. McGill. I have some words for you on it, but they just wouldn't be marketing.
Genius.
Legend.
Keep it clean. Genius, no? You're dead, buddy.
So that's what the point of this is think very carefully who it is that you would like to see in your life within the next sort of 12 months, and then just how do you go about doing it.
I had a very good example of that, Patrick, in terms of I was out in America and seeing a product and didn't see it here. And I thought when I come back I would try and source it to see if we could maybe sell it. And got product details, got the company, and went on LinkedIn and seen a girl that was attached to that company, and reached out. And because all Americans have a Granny or Sunday Irish, she was back immediately. She was able to tell me that the product actually was in a separate division, that they had tried it, that it didn't work in America, that they had stopped it. But she actually sent me a box of the product for myself. And I find that totally amazing.
Mm.
And it just showed me the power of LinkedIn and, you know,
Yeah.
just getting off your ass and
Of a
doing something
network,
about it. Totally amazing.
And another kind of thing there, just as you're speaking about that, another essence of it, networking doesn't necessarily, yes, you would love to get business for yourself out of it, but what I've come to sort of learn is knowing who you know in your sort of network, you could really help someone else out in theirs. And so it's not about connecting with somebody, oh, they're no good to me because they're not interested in what I have to offer. It's more, well, what is it that you sort of need in the world, and if there's someone I know that's in that could sort of speak to that in a much better way, then you can join them dots for them and make their sort of collapse their sort of degrees of separation from their own problem. And in a way, it's kind of being of service to some extent. And you're building, and in that way, you're taking the pressure off the idea then of actually I have to go out here and get business and I need to do this and I need to connect with them and not sort of use people, but then it becomes, well, how do I get to know this person? And you build relationships, friendships, and you know, some people would describe being in a business, running a business and things like that, it can be a very lonely space. Whereas if you build relationships and friendships with people that are doing similar kind of things or very different things but run a business, then in the long run it can be very beneficial. So the world is now more connected than it ever has. So networking and connecting hasn't been as accessible to up to now. So kings and queens, like we're all even 100 years ago, 200 years ago, you know, they used things like pigeons, messengers that took weeks on horseback and whatever. They meet people in different things. They broker trade deals and agreements and things like that. And that was only what they were just like royalty was kind of doing that. Where now it's accessible to everybody. There's everyone has the same kind of power, literally in the pocket now with mobile phones. So it takes far less resources and energy to do it now. And finally, so who is it? As a takeaway, who is it that you would like to speak to? Where are they? How could you best approach and connect with them? And how does your product or service solve their problem? And in a business context at scale, how can you best let them know about it? And that would be you go on there, they market. So that's it. Any questions?
There's a social element to it as well too, just sort of off the back of what you're saying, and for taking the likes of the canoe club and I would get business out of that, but it's directly related to the fact that I go out canoeing once a month with these guys and it's just brand awareness. They say, oh right, family does planes, blah blah blah, and next thing one of their wives phone or something like that. So there's a social element to it as well too. And we would all obviously appreciate that because of the stuff that we would do over and above the business network as well too, you know, external events and type things like that. So I'm sure we've all been to networking events, everybody here is probably bored to the teeth of being to networking events at some stage, but it's what you take out of it from a social aspect as well too, because I've still got a lot of good, well I don't know about it in here, but I still have a lot of good friends You're supposed to be honey. So there's a definite social sort of aspect to it as well too, which I always think it never gets paid much lip service. So it doesn't, because everybody's focused on business all the time.
And inherently we're social creatures. It's when isolation and things like that creep on, you know, that's where people would describe the mental health problems kicking in as well.
I just think that when we're in a networking group, it's important for every one of us to get our 60 seconds, maybe 30 seconds of a wee speech. If we meet somebody, like, you know, Wendy, you met Rena for the first time today, but neither one of you thought to say what your name was, who you worked for, you know, what you did. It's all learning about how to network, and if you have that wee 30 to 60 seconds of my name is, you'll see, you'll hear the 60 seconds as everybody's going around. You just know that they say, and you just rhyme it off. It's not formal. It's just something that you would know to say. My name is Karen Stewart. I do this, I do that, I do the other. And what do you do? That's it.
I think that's the the benefit of having this, like a networking group, like a Foyle Business Network, it's like you come in every week, and the person you were a year ago compared to a year's time will be completely different, just by small wee tweaks like what Karen's mentioned, you know. And a conversation, yes, find out what someone else does, but also don't forget to say a wee bit about what you do, and not in a sort of pig-headed way, but just, you know,
Yeah.
how can we work together? There's one more slide actually. That's the ceoemail.com. There's another thing called the Oracle of Bacon.org. Do you know Kevin Bacon? The guy that does
Yeah.
media ads?
Yeah.
Game, is it?
There's a game online, but it shows you that in action, how many movies he's related to different people. If there's nobody who doesn't know. If you go on that website, Oracle of Bacon, type in Sandra Bullock, and they'll tell you through movies rather than through people how they're connected. And there's a movie as well, come out in 99, I think it was.
Did the exercise change your perspective on networking, or were you kind of?
It's brought a lot more depth to it.
Yeah.
It definitely has. So I can be even more conscious of it. Like I've been at the end now, properly a year and a half, I would say. I was on a visitor for about a while before, about a year and a half, so maybe once a month, maybe come on once every sort of 6 weeks, and sort of seeing, you know, a lot more pennies have kind of dropped and things like that. So to do it in a, it's a bit, no, I do think it's very good. That's it. Thank you.
Right, thank you again. So that is really part of what we do. That 10 minutes education slot each week can be on any topic that the person taking it wants to do.